Hello Marshfields, hope you're all well and staying safe. So today I'm going to be talking to you about some physics, and it's the physics of sinking and floating. To investigate sinking and floating, I've collected lots of different items from around my house. I've got spoons and money and kitchen roll, elastic bands, stones, all sorts of bits. You'll be able to try this at home, collect some things and test it out. What sinks and what floats. Now remember, sinking means that it's going to fall to the bottom. It's going to go down to the bottom of the tank. If it floats, then it's going to sit on the water. You might have heard the saying, sinks like a stone, but does a stone actually sink? What happened? It went right to the bottom, which means, that's right, it sinks. What about the money? Will it sink or will it float? And there it goes down to the bottom. It sinks. But what about foil? Foil's made of metal. The coins are made of metal. Will the foil sink or float? Look at that. The foil is sitting on top of the water. So that means it floats. What about the Lego? The Lego has got lots of holes inside. So if they fill up with water, is it going to sink? But then it's quite light, so maybe it'll sit on top of the water. What do you think? Will the Lego sink or float? So let's drop the Lego in and see what happens. So did it sink or did it float? It sat on top of the water. And there it is, floating on the surface of the water. So what about the grapefruit? I like to have grapefruit for breakfast, but I wouldn't eat it like this. I'd peel it. So let's have a look and find out if the grapefruit will sink or float. Oh, it went right down to the bottom, but look, it bobbed back up. So is that sinking or floating? Well, it seems to be staying on the surface. So that is floating. But what happens if I peel my grapefruit? So here it is, I've peeled the grapefruit. There we go. So what's going to happen now? Will it sink or will it float? Oh, look, it sinks. So before, when it had its skin on it, it floated. Now I've taken the skin off, it sinks. So what's going on there? So as I look in my tank, I've got things at the bottom that sank and things at the top that floated. But what makes some things sink and some things float? There are two main reasons why some things sink and some things float. The first reason is density. Everything is made of stuff, molecules, little bits of stuff. Here all the molecules are packed close together. These items, where the molecules are packed close together, are dense and they sink. Other things, the molecules are more loosely packed. There's space in between. These items will float. The skin of the grapefruit is less dense than the grapefruit inside, which is why the skin will float, but the fruit inside will sink. When the fruit was all wrapped up in that skin, it held it at the surface of the water. It floated. But when we take that skin away, the grapefruit sinks. We already know that the foil floats. But what happens if I change the foil? If I fold it up, will it still float or will it sink? So I'm going to screw this foil up really tight as I can. Squish it all. Now it's the same piece of foil that floated before. All we've changed is how it's arranged. Let's drop this in the water and see, will it sink or will it float? Look at that, it sinks. So when it was a sheet and all spread out, it floated on the surface of the water. But when we screwed it up and squashed it, so all those molecules were packed really densely, it sank. What about then a whole watermelon? This watermelon hasn't been cut and it's very heavy. Will it sink or will it float? Now it's very heavy and it's hard to hold with just one hand. Let's see, sink or float. Look, bobbing around on the water. It's floating. So how does that work? So here's a diagram I've drawn of the watermelon in the tank. The watermelon sat on the top of the water. It floated. So we know that the watermelon floats, but it was really heavy, so why did it float? Well, the answer is here. Buoyancy. Buoyancy is the force that is pushing up. The weight of the watermelon pushes down and buoyancy pushes up. If the buoyancy is greater than the weight, then the item will float. I've still got lots of items to investigate. Will they float or will they sink? So while I investigate my items, it's your turn. Find some items and make some predictions. It's your ideas. What do you think? Will it float or will it sink? When you've made your prediction, drop it in the water and see. Test out. That's the fun of investigation, finding out. Enjoy this experiment and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye!